So glad everybody could join us. Got a great session on taps for today. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Mark Stoddard, run sales and marketing here at Client Success. I've also got Dave Blake, CEO of Client Success. And most importantly, we have today's guest of honor, Kristen Hayer from Success League. Kristen, Dave, what's up?
Hey, thank you.
How you doing, everyone? Thanks for joining us again.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited. So this is going to be good. Let's see here. Any other skills? We got some folks learning that remote work is not bad. Let's see, New Orleans is 80 and sunny. Ashley's learning patience and creativity. I get that. So, well, good. So glad everybody could join us. And so as we've talked about on the last few sessions, the series is in full swing. We've got Kristen on today. Thursday, we have Mike Harnum from ESG. Next week, we've got Patrick from ProfitWell, Julie from Drift. Really great series of heavy hitters. If you want to go back and see any of the other sessions we've done in the series, just go to clientsuccess.com/webinars. You'll see all the recordings there. After we wrap up with Kristen today, we'll post the recording there too. And so just hoping that we can just share as much helpful content that, gets you guys through everything that's going on right now. And so I'm glad everybody could join us again. And I think I will turn it over to Dave. I think Dave wants to share a couple things and then we'll go from there. Dave, you still there?
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks
for joining, everybody. We're stoked that you could come back. I think there's some who have been here before. If you've watched one of these seminars before, go ahead and tell us in chat. And if you know who Client Success is, if you know what we do, I would love to know in chat as well. Mark will share a little bit more, but just curious out there if you know what Client Success does and what our solution's about. But a few things. One, thanks for all your help with this campaign. We put out a campaign we call Help One, Hire One. The goal is to try to help our friends in the community find jobs. We know that many have been laid off. They're awesome professionals. We feel our heart goes out to them, and we're soliciting everybody to help out, to make an introduction, point them to a job, anything you could do to help them get rehired, that would be great. And also, if you're a leader and your company is hiring, please hire one of these great professionals. So share the hashtag Help One Hire One and help our colleagues in the space. Second thing is we're encouraging everybody. I've got my growth plus growth, positive growth. Everybody's asked me what this t-shirt is about. It's my case against calling things negative churn when it's positive growth. And we hope that we're helping you to grow and expand your skill set, help you to be inspired in some way through these series. And we hope that you'll invite your friends to come back on the next one. We've got an awesome one today. We're so excited for Kristen. She is a great friend of our company and just a great person, a great leader. She's got a heart of gold. She's always willing to help. And her firm, the Success League, does a great job in consulting. So we're excited to have her here today. You'll enjoy her. And just want to thank you all again for joining. We hope that you come every Tuesday and Thursday, same time, same place. We'll continue to do it. So thank you. Be safe, be well, and turn it back over to Mark and Kristen. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks, Dave. So yeah, like Dave said, we're continuing on in this, and looks like we've got a bunch of repeat attendees. We've got a bunch of customers. We got a bunch of folks who are familiar with Client Success. So really cool to see just how many people are out there familiar with us. For those of you who aren't familiar with Client Success, I'll give you a little bit of an intro into us. That we've got several first-time attendees on, and so if those who are just learning about us, or those who maybe want a refresher, we're a customer success growth platform. And so what we do is we help customer success teams do everything they need to do to drive success, whether that's driving onboarding, adoption, renewals, growth. And at the same time, giving your entire company everything that they need. So for instance, driving insights, being able to share what's going on with health, giving your company the ability to collaborate around what's going on with customers. If you've looked at us in the past and it's been a while, I recommend you shoot us a note and have a look at what we've released recently. We've had some really cool stuff that's come out recently. We've done some really great stuff around customer feedback with NPS, done some really innovative things there. We just released a really clean Slack integration, so you can share customer health, you can share NPS updates with your entire company through Slack. So if you're using that, we've seen a lot of people really use that. We're about to release what we think is going to be a game-changing revenue management platform that's really going to level things up. So if you want to have a look, hit us up. We're at clientsuccess.com, or see us on Twitter at clientsuccess. Love to show you what we've been doing lately. So with that being said, we will jump into today's topic. Thrilled to have Kristen on. She and I have been talking about a few different topics over the last few weeks. And when she shared the idea with me for today's presentation, I got fired up. Because for me, frontline management is really important in all times. And right now it's just table stakes. You really can't get away without it. So Kristen's going to have a ton of great advice for you. You'll really like it. And like we always do, so Kristen will share some thoughts. We'll make this a very interactive session back and forth. There's a few points during the presentation where we'll stop, manage Q&A. We'll do all the Q&A today through the chat panel, so I'll be monitoring that. And so yeah, let's jump right in. Kristen, where should we get started?
Can I share my slide deck?
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Let me stop sharing on my side.
And let me get my deck shared.
Good.
All right.
There you go.
Let me do, okay, does that look good, Mark? Full screen?
Perfect. Yep,
okay,
full screen.
Great.
Yep.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to this webinar, and I hope you find it helpful. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, my name is Kristen Hayer, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Success League. We're a consulting and training company focused on customer success. About a decade ago, I was a VP of sales. And so my background really was on the sales side of things. And I had the opportunity to build and develop a couple of customer success teams. And then decided that there was a lot of need for people that had experience doing that in our field. And so I started the Success League about 5 years ago. And since then, we've been working on a lot of different kinds of projects. So customer success to me is a really exciting and new field, but what really drives me at my core is management. And the reason for that is because I feel like good managers are people who make so many other people's lives better. So if you're a great manager, everyone who works for you has a better work-life experience. And if you are a leader who creates great managers, you just multiply that. And so I think that great management can have an incredible impact on the world. And so this is what I'm most passionate about. And a lot of what we do at the Success League ties into leadership. So what I want to share with you today is really how we think about management in a time of crisis, like the one that we're in right now. So I want to start here. COVID-19 obviously is a very serious crisis for the whole world. It's challenging all of us. It's challenging us physically, it's challenging us emotionally, financially, and politically. I can't speak for all of you in the audience, but this is definitely the most impactful situation I have lived through so far in my life. And I think in a situation like this, all of us, leaders and customer success frontline professionals, we face challenges and changes to the way that we work. And I think one of the biggest changes is working from home. This brings up a number of issues for teams, but especially for newer CS leaders who haven't really formalized their management style yet. So no longer can those managers rely on walking around or sitting near their teams because we're all at home. So how does this create a challenge for those managers? I think the first thing is that their team needs support, and they can't give it by sitting next to that person. They can't even tell maybe that they need support because they can't always see them physically. People need emotional support right now, and people need practical support as well. And so management best practices can help you understand who needs support and when, and what you can do to support your team. I think the other thing right now is that companies need information. We're all facing a great deal of change, and we're also facing a lot of insecurity about what's coming in the future. And the more that your company can get information about what's happening with your customers, the better. So companies need predictive information and preventative information. And if you're a CS leader, that comes from your team. So you need a way to get that information from your group. I think the other thing that is surfacing right now is that casual tactics for management don't work anymore. You don't have those visual cues. You can't just listen into your team. So you need a more basic and structured way to think about how you're going to manage so that you can uncover some of those things that you would uncover in a casual setting. We're also facing big time management challenges. I don't know about you, but I have a kid at home and she's going to school, and there is some level of management on my part that has to happen in order to make that work. She's a high schooler, so I actually have it pretty easy compared to almost all of my friends who have little kids. And that takes time, and we're trying to all balance that with working full time. Some teams have sick team members who actually have COVID, and that's creating pressure on their team. There are distractions. I have definitely gone down the COVID-19 research rabbit hole a number of times. It's easy to get distracted and go do that. And
get distracted, and then it changes every 48 hours, and you're
yeah,
back down another
exactly.
rabbit hole. And, yeah, it just keeps
Yeah.
going.
So all of this is creating time management challenges for all of us. And so, you know, I think it's important to keep that in mind and know that part of dealing with this emotionally is having a little extra time to do that. And so managers are facing teams that aren't as productive as they used to be on their own. I think the other challenge is staffing challenges. So people are being asked to do more in less time. There have been layoffs, there have been people furloughed, there are people who are sick. And so that's creating a staffing challenge on these teams as well. So all of this working remotely through a health and a financial crisis at this point really intensifies this need for very strong management. So now is the time for leadership and leaders who lead through management best practices. And that's really what I want to talk about today. As I've been thinking about this and talking to a lot of our clients, I've been trying to figure out what is preventing newer leaders from adopting some of the best practices that are standard management best practices that have been around for a long time. And in talking to people, I've uncovered that there's this real trend about being afraid of being seen as a micromanager. And I hear this all the time from newer managers. And I think we've all had micromanagers who we worked for. I know I certainly have. I don't know, Mark, if you ever have.
I've definitely had micromanagers, and it's also one of those things where it's like if you're transitioning from frontline to a management role, which a lot of people do, it's it's something to the effect of thinking about how I was managed as a frontline. When I was an individual contributor, how my manager and I interacted might be very different than how I should interact with my team once I become a frontline manager. So there's a lot of different ways to think about that.
Yeah. And I keep hearing from newer managers in the CS space that, oh, I don't want to be a micromanager.
Yep.
And so in thinking about this and doing some reading on this, and I'll share the books that I've been reading lately at the end,
Nice.
but there's really kind of three types of management that I'm seeing out there right now. There are actual micromanagers, and then there are people who are what I would consider an effective manager. And then there are managers who are managers in title, but are not really acting like a manager. Micromanagement really seems to stem from attitude more than anything else. So I'm going to read through this list of characteristics, and I want you in the audience to really think about leaders who you've worked for that exhibited the characteristics of a micromanager, because these are pretty strong. These are people who measure every task assigned to a direct report, regardless of the importance of that task. These are people who manage by bossing around. These are people who see management as an opportunity to be the boss. That's why they got into management, is they wanted to be the boss. These are people who don't listen to team members. These are people who hold team members accountable for everything, including the things that they themselves missed. So they're putting the pressure on everybody on their team. These are people who see coaching as a threat, because if they coach someone and they help them become better, that could challenge their own position. And then these are also people who are unwilling to delegate work because they fear losing control of the outcome. So a lot of this is around insecurity, fear, and a lot of desire for power. And that's what creates a micromanager. Those are pretty strong. And I want you to be thinking about your own management approach if you're a manager in the audience, and think about whether or not you might exhibit some of these things. It's really normal in your early days as a manager to veer toward one of the two ends of the spectrum.
And if you are a micromanager, you don't have to tell us in the chat pane. It's fine.
No.
You can keep that. You
can keep that to yourself. It's okay. And I will tell you, you can change too. So you're not like a micromanager and you have that stamp on your forehead and it's there forever. I will say, when I was a newer manager, I started out with micromanager tendencies, and I feel like I've mostly gotten myself out of that. But I think in order to avoid being seen as a micromanager, what I see many newer managers doing is going too far in the opposite direction. So they swing from micromanager through effective manager to the other end, which is not really being a manager. And so I'm going to read through this list too, and I want you to think about whether any of these characteristics apply to you. So not really being a manager is people who don't measure anything unless they're asked by senior management to do so. They manage by walking around, and that's their primary form of management.
Which is obviously very easy to do right now.
It is. Yeah. Because all those empty offices, it's all cleared out, easy to walk around. They see management as a way to progress their career. So this was kind of the next natural step for them, regardless of whether this was a strong desire on their part or not. They allow conversations with their team to enter the areas of gossip or bad-mouthing. So instead of not listening, they're going too far in the other direction and kind of acting almost more like a peer than a leader. Mm-hmm. They may be nervous that holding team members accountable will make them less likable, because being likable is important to them. They're afraid that if they try to coach somebody, they'll be seen as a know-it-all. This is especially true of people who have come up from inside a team where they used to be a peer and now they're the leader. Sure. And they don't want all the people who used to be their peers thinking that they're trying to boss them around now.
And sometimes it comes from the idea of, I think if I'm coaching, I need to have the answers. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes coaching is just asking the appropriate questions when you might not know the answer, but you're asking questions to try to get to an answer. But if you think you have to be the know-it-all, effectively your team will never raise, above your level of competence. Right. But if you can ask good questions, you can actually get them to raise above even your level of competence.
Yeah. I think that the last thing is they're unwilling to delegate too. So like a micromanager, they don't want to delegate, but the reason behind that is different. And it's because they tie their own personal value to their individual work contributions. And this is true of a lot of newer managers. They still think that their value comes from the work that they do. And when you become a leader, the value that you bring to the table is the work that your team does. And that's a mindset shift that is sometimes hard for people to make. So I want you to really think about these two lists, the micromanager list and the not really being a manager list. And I want to bring it to the middle, which is, what is it to be an effective manager? So an effective manager measures and direct reports activities that support goals and performance. So not every activity, but the important activities.
I gotta call out Ryan, who says it sounds like Michael Scott from The Office was not really being a manager despite being the regional manager.
Yes. Way too much needing to be liked. Managing through one-on-one meetings, discussing performance, and active coaching. So effective managers have a system that they use to manage their team, and it's through those tools. We're going to talk about those tools in a few minutes. They also see management as an opportunity to serve the team. So instead of seeing it as a way to be the boss or seeing it as just the next step on your career path, they see it as an opportunity to really serve others in their group. They ask questions and they actively listen to their team members. So this is really important. It goes, Mark, to your earlier point that it's not about having all the answers. It's about asking good questions and having people think through what they need to do next. Holding team members accountable for goal-based activities. So what are the activities that are going to lead to the achievement of the team's goals and the individual's goals? So there's a level of accountability that effective managers teach their teams to have. These guys see coaching as a way to drive better performance and build career paths. So this is why they coach. They want to have their team perform better, and they want to get their team going down that career path that they want to have. And so we're going to talk about coaching in a few minutes as well, but I want to make sure that's in there. And then finally, delegation. Delegation is such an important part of being a great manager for two reasons. One, for yourself, you can offload the work that prevents you from spending time doing the stuff you need to be doing as a leader that's on this list. And then second, if you don't ever delegate anything to members of your team, they'll never be able to grow to a level where they could take your place. And if you don't have someone who can take your place, you can't move on. So it's important to be able to delegate as a leader. Hopefully in reading through these lists and kind of talking this through with Mark, you guys can start to see where maybe you lie on these lists. I want to encourage all of you who see yourself in the micromanager or the not really being a manager lists, you can change your approach and you can change your attitude toward management. People don't just sort of pop out being really great leaders. They learn to be a good leader through learning the discipline of strong management. And there's a lot of resources. I'm going to share a bunch of them with you at the end on how you can do this. But I want to share with you some of the steps that you can take to become an effective manager for your team. And they're really important during this time of crisis. But before we go on to doing that, I want to stop and see if there's any questions or comments. So
yeah, we could probably spend a whole hour just on this slide itself, because there's just a ton of really good stuff here. Okay. One of the questions we have here related to habits. So Sunny John says, so would driving habits, good habits, be micromanaging? Yeah. So how can managers instill good habits, say whether that's around process or something related, without being seen as a micromanager for driving that habit? What's your advice there?
So I think the main thing is those habits that you're trying to drive shouldn't just be for no reason, and your team shouldn't see them as being there for no reason. They need to be attached in some way to the goals that you have for your team. So they have to be related to the performance metrics that you have in place. So, and that may be really obvious to you as the leader, but you need to recognize that it may not be as obvious to your team how those habits you're trying to drive relate to the goals. So you need to draw that line for your team. And if you do that, that will keep you from being seen as a micromanager.
For me, oftentimes, agreed with everything you said there. For me, oftentimes, it's just understanding the why. Like, I'm going to ask my team to do something. And if I'm not really good at communicating the why behind that, then I'm going to get, I should get pushback. Because if I'm asking my team to, in the sales context, oftentimes it's managing activity or managing, calls, emails, etc. In the customer success context, there's similar kind of things that we all have to do. And, they're different in different contexts, but if I'm asking my team to do something, or I'm doing something myself and I don't really have a good, clear reason why, because this thing leads to some extra outcome that we want, for me, that's where it falls apart. Cool. So we've got a couple other questions.
Sure.
Kristen asks, difference between remote teams and, let's call it office-based teams. Do you see a difference? Is there more micromanaging on remote teams because perhaps I'm not able to pull off the, bossing or walking around as easy? Do you see a difference there?
So I would argue that if you're being an effective manager and you're putting some of the tactics in place that we're going to talk through in a minute, those may to you, if you haven't used them before, feel a little micromanagey, but they're not micromanaging. I think if you're being an effective manager, it does not matter if your team is remote or in the office. You're doing the same kinds of things. The only difference I will say is, I think when you are managing a remote team, it's really hard. There's a lot of visual cues we get from working with somebody in person. You can pick up if they're sad, disappointed, you get all the emotional read, and I think you miss that a lot when you're not in the office together. And so I would say the addition when you're managing a remote team is this face-to-face that we're having on Zoom right now, absolutely critical. So that's kind of the addition to the suite of tactics, is making sure that you're having FaceTime with your people. But then otherwise, you don't need to do anything really that different. You may set up your meetings a little differently. You may increase the cadence of certain kinds of things you're doing, but the core of your management style should stay the same.
Yeah, the face-to-face one's critical. I remember the very
Yeah.
first week that we went quote unquote remote, we had a discussion, not just with our team, but with the entire company of kind of, here's how we're going to do, best practices, in Zoom over the remote period. And one of the things we made as a requirement, if you're on Zoom, you're on video. And I don't care if your dog, your kid, your whatever is behind you, nobody cares at these days, but you're always on video because you've got to have it, to really get that human interaction. A bunch of questions in here. I'll read a couple more here.
Okay.
So Lindsay asked something that a lot of you kind of have to go through this process at some point if you're going to be a manager, but she says, for individuals stepping into a manager position over their previous peers, what do you suggest to settle into an effective manager role without falling into the not being a manager? What's your advice for somebody who's stepping in kind of to that role for the first time over previous peers? Let's call it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things you can do is sort of a core management best practice, which is immediately start having one-on-ones every week with those folks. And that will do a couple of things for you. That will change the dynamic of your relationship without taking away from your caring for that person as a person. The reality is, it is really tough to be friends with people who report to you, because it crosses some lines that are really tough. And so it's something that when I'm talking to people who are thinking about going into leadership, you really need to consider, because what you need to know is that you are in a position that is very different from your peers when you do that, and you need there to be a line that you don't cross. And that can be hard for people, and that might not be what you want to do. But getting going with one-on-ones right away can make a big difference, because it shows that you are in a new role, but that you still care about those people, and that your job has changed. Your job is no longer about being an individual performer. It's about helping them perform better. And that doesn't mean telling them what to do. It means coaching them through how to become the best that they can be, and then also helping them move to the next stage of their career. And so just kind of that change in focus really comes into focus when you start having those one-on-ones immediately.
Remember, one of the things one of my early managers did, who actually went through this exact process. He was a peer on the team, and then he was promoted to lead the team. Is he sat down with all of us and had instead of like a working session one-on-one, it was a like, how do you want to work together session? What are the things that managers? What are the things you see that you like managers to do, not like managers to do? What's your working style? So we were able to detach from the day to day of working together and actually talk about how we want to work together. And that was a conversation that we continued to revisit every quarter or so as we worked together and we built more trust with one another. So that was something that I found really helpful.
That's great.
Susan asks an interesting question here. If you're on the other side of this, what's your advice if you are reporting to a micromanager? And so, Kristen, if you could just put that manager's name in the chat, we'll call. I'm kidding.
We'll deal with him for you.
We'll deal with him because it's always a him. I'm kidding.
That's not true.
But yeah, what's your advice if you're reporting into a micromanager? How do you deal with that?
This is a great resource for you. I don't know if it's showing right side up on your screen or not. It's called My Way or the Highway. And I'm going to mention this book again at the end, but it is for people who know they are a micromanager and it helps them improve, but it also is for people who work for a micromanager and it helps you deal with that person more effectively. I could spend a whole session talking about tactics for dealing with a micromanager, but I want to kind of focus on the leaders. So this is a great book though for that.
Cool. Literally we could spend the rest of the session on this with the amount of questions we've got on this. Do you want to keep taking questions or do you want to go through some of the other slides?
I actually want to go through some of the tactics because I think some of this will probably answer some of the questions. And if not, we'll get to more questions at the end.
Cool.
But
so a bunch of questions in there. Appreciate them. We'll come back to them. Some of them will be answered with these few slides.
The other thing, Mark, is if we run out of time for me to answer questions, if you want to just send me the ones that didn't get answered,
that's a good idea.
I can answer them maybe on a blog or something.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, cool. Okay, so how do you fix this? How do you become that effective manager? The starting point, and this is the number one thing I can tell all of you, is you must have metrics-based goals for your team. And this one was a tough one for me to learn. I didn't really have a great coach when I was learning to be a manager. And so I kind of had to just figure a lot of this stuff out on my own. And it took me a while to figure this one out, but you don't have to wait for your company to give you goals. There are so many companies out there that have not figured out that they should have performance goals for their teams. And if you work for one of those companies, you don't need to wait for your company to give you goals. You can create your own goals for your team and hold your team accountable to them. It's okay to do that. And that's part of what you should be doing as a leader. Without metrics-based goals for your team, no one will know how they're really performing. And frankly, you won't know how you're doing as a leader because everyone's just doing stuff. And you don't really have priorities that tell you how important that stuff is. So set goals. When you're setting goals, customer success key metrics usually include things in these buckets. So something in the retention bucket, that could be net recurring revenue, that could be retention rate, that could be a churn rate, whatever it is that you think is important for your company, but there should always be something in there. Often customer success metrics include something in the expansion revenue area. And even if your team isn't doing any selling, you still have a huge influence on expansion revenue. You might be handing off leads to your sales team. You could measure that. So make sure you've got something in that expansion revenue area. And then the last big bucket is customer satisfaction. So how are you impacting the satisfaction of your clients? You may already be measuring something formally like NPS or CSAT, or you may need to create some sort of SAT measure. The other thing that I've seen some of our customers do that I think is really a creative way to tackle customer satisfaction is they actually measure the number of customers of their customer base that have said they're willing to be a reference. And that's another way to measure satisfaction. It's actually like real life NPS. These are the people that are actually willing to put their reputation and name on the line for your company and say, yes, these guys are great to work with. So something in each of those buckets is a great place to start. If you're having to make these up, I would say choose 2 or 3 metrics-based goals for your team. It's really hard for people to remember more than 3 things. So I think 3 is about the max. It's just like setting goals for yourself. You don't want to go into the beginning of the year and have 10 goals of things you want to try to accomplish throughout the year. You want to have 2 or 3 that you really want to zero in on. And then choose metrics that you have the ability to measure. Don't choose theoretical, oh, we think we should be measuring this, so we're going to make this a goal, but oh, we don't really actually have any way to look at it. You need to use the tools you've got and use the metrics that you can measure to set these goals. Otherwise, we're going to run into some problems, which I'll talk about on a slide that's coming. But choose metrics you can measure, and then you can also supplement those metrics-based goals with some activity or project goals as well. really, you want to be ideally measuring results. That helps you in a lot of different ways as you communicate your team's value upstream. But if you're just building your team and you have a new team, you may want to have a goal around getting a playbook built, or you may want to have a goal around, if you're trying to drive habits, as somebody mentioned earlier, you may want to have an activity goal around, delivering executive business reviews or something like that, because it will drive one of those other results-oriented metrics. So build goals for your team if you don't already have them. This is step one to being an effective manager. So make sure you have these in place. Step two, and I am not always popular when I say this because people have different philosophies about this, but you must have a weekly one-on-one meeting with every single direct report. Now, you don't have to have them with your down level reports. So if you're a director and you have 2 managers who work for you, those 2 managers who are your direct reports are the ones that you need one-on-ones with. You don't need to also have one-on-ones with all the people that report to them. Everybody who is a leader, though, needs a weekly one-on-one with every single one of their direct reports. This is a proven metric for leadership that has been tested and tried over the years. It should be 30 minutes long. They've done studies on this, and they've found that having it be an hour doesn't really improve performance at all. It does need to, however, be weekly, because the point of these one-on-one meetings is twofold. One is to kind of make sure your teams are on track performance-wise, but the other piece is to build a relationship with people on your team, and you can't really do that if it's once a month. It just doesn't work. It takes time for people to warm up. And even in a 30-minute conversation, the deep, rich parts of that conversation aren't going to happen until the last 10 minutes. So you need to be doing this regularly, or you're not going to have those strong relationships with your team to really drive effective performance. So you don't have to have them be longer, but you do need to have them be weekly. Weekly meetings drive that strong professional relationship that you need. And this is part of what keeps you from being a micromanager. You need that relationship with your team, and they need to see you as a strong leader. The discussion should be pretty formatted. Usually you want to start by talking about performance against goals. You want to tackle any challenges your team members running into. It's a chance for you to offer coaching ideas and feedback if you need to do that. And you also have a chance to talk about career development. Where does this person want to go? You may not be doing that when the person is brand new to your team, but certainly if they've been on board for 6 months and they're looking toward what is my next step, career development should be a part of that conversation. My other thing I had to learn the hard way is do not reschedule these unless you absolutely have to. Choose a time you can stick with, because I actually had a member of my team call me out for rescheduling his meeting too much. And he said, Kristen, you are making me feel so unimportant when you reschedule our meeting every week. And I was shocked. I was like, oh gosh, he knows how busy I am, and I know how busy he is. And I made him feel terrible because I was looking at the rest of the stuff that I was doing as more important than him. The people on our teams are the most important part of our jobs as leaders. And so when we reschedule too much, it starts to make them feel unimportant, and that's going to result in morale issues on your team.
Yeah, and even just the amount of showing up late. Like I remember I had a manager once who every single time we had a meeting, no matter what, I could set my clock by, he's going to be 13 minutes late. And I had a similar kind of, effect where it was like, all right, well, yeah. Eventually I just learned to deal with it, and I would, block out my next meeting afterwards. But it has the same, can have the same effect.
Yeah, it makes you feel pretty terrible when your leader is choosing not to meet with you. And yep. So it's important, if you're the leader, to not make that happen. Yep. Make sure you're showing up, and then take notes. Notes show that you're listening. There's also a great tool called 15-5 that you can use to kind of guide the discussion if you want to. But these are so important. This is one of the most important things you can do as a leader. So I was going to stop for questions, but I know we're getting a little tight on time, so I'm going to cruise through a couple more slides, and then we'll give it a stop. You need to make sure that people understand how they're performing. So this is all about transparency. Remember how a couple slides ago I said that you needed to make sure you were measuring things that you had tools to measure? This is why. Your teams need to understand how they're doing at any given point in time. So they need easy access to their current level of performance against their goals. Anyone at any point should be able to go, oh, let me go into this dashboard and see how I'm doing because I'm supposed to be delivering 12 executive business reviews this quarter and I need to know where I'm at. It should be that level of transparent. There's a lot of tools that we already have that you can use to track this kind of thing. Your CRM system is kind of the most obvious one. Almost everybody has a CRM tool. Salesforce is kind of what I'm talking about if you're not sure what CRM means. Also, if you have a CS platform, client success is a CS platform. That's what I mean when I say that. You might be able to track that there. All of those tools, Salesforce, client success, other CRM systems, all have the ability to deliver reporting that you can look at to see how you're performing. So see what you can do to set up some dashboards or reports that help your team understand how they're doing against their goals. If you don't have tools like that, or if the goal that you're trying to track is a little more manual, you could employ a spreadsheet. Smartsheet is great for that. And that's more of a manual, private way of sharing that information. Or if it's something that you want to display publicly, you can use a leaderboard. That can even be a whiteboard where you write down every day how people are doing against their goals. That is more public. So if this is brand new to your team, I would say start private first and keep it one-on-one between you and your direct report, and then build them up to being comfortable seeing their performance shown publicly. So don't start out with that right away or you'll freak people out. Dashboards are great. They allow team members to get in and hold themselves accountable for their own goals and activities. And if you can set those up, that's really kind of optimal. That's all I really wanted to say there. I kind of got into that last bullet point already. Do you have anything you want to add, Mark?
Not to that. I mean, we've got this is obviously I was right when this was going to be a hot topic. We got more questions I think than we've had on any other session waiting for us. So
okay, cool. I'm going to keep going. So another tactic for leadership is active coaching. So I broke this slide down by the stage of maturity of a person on your team. So if you have a brand new team member, coaching should be focused on making sure they can effectively perform their job. And what I want to say here is that when you hire a new CSM, you can't assume that they're coming out of the same kind of customer success program that you have. So you really do need to double check on their work and make sure you're sitting with them and actively coaching them. So I think one of the best ways to do this is to shadow them. So sit at their, well, you can't do this right now, but you can in the future, hopefully. Sit at their desk or shadow them on Zoom meetings, but actually be with them while they're engaging with customers and make sure that you're taking notes. And then as soon as the meeting is over, provide feedback on the spot, or as soon as you've seen them type out the email and you've looked at what they're saying, provide feedback on that so that they're getting immediate feedback on what they're doing. For new team members, that's important, and I would say probably should continue for at least a couple of months, maybe longer if you have a more complex product. A growing team member is somebody who is no longer new, but isn't really ready for their next thing yet. And your goal for a growing team member is to really help them become a top performer on your team. So here you want to focus your shadowing on challenging situations. So maybe hop on that Zoom call with a customer that's upset, or where there's going to be a difficult conversation involved. Not because you're going to jump in as the leader and say things for the customer. In fact, it's really hard to be on these calls because your job is to shut up and listen and take good notes. And so you cannot jump in and do the work for them. You have to observe, and they will make mistakes. Your job is to, after that call, give them feedback on what they could have done differently to improve the call and help them become a better and better performer over time. It's so hard to hold yourself back sometimes. I've totally been there, but you have to be quiet on those calls. You're just there as an observer. Finally, when you have a team member who's getting ready to promote into a role that they've been waiting for and looking forward to, your goal is to help them build skills for that next career set. So help them by thinking about their career aspirations. Do they want to go into leadership? Do they want to go into a different, more substantial individual contributor role? Do they want to move to a different department in your company? Talk about those career aspirations and then help them identify the skills they're going to need to build to be successful in interviewing for, landing, and being in that new role. You can design goals and challenges to help them build skills. One of the things that I used to do for my own teams was always have a goal every quarter that was tied to their career development. And that could be reading a book or attending a webinar and reporting back to the team, or working on a skill by doing a project for a different group in the company. Whatever it is, really help them and push them forward by giving them opportunities to try new things. And I think then you provide feedback in one-on-ones for them. So that's active coaching. And I think it shifts as you go through the life cycle of an employee.
Yeah, for me, it almost feels like when you're a new team member, you're almost more, you're less in coaching mode and more in training mode, showing people, here's how you do it. You've got your growing team member, which is actually where I feel like the biggest opportunity is for coaching and development. They've got the baseline, they've got, they're in most cases, unconsciously competent, or depending on how you look at that, but they kind of know what they need to do. It's a matter of getting them to level up. I love the promoting team member one. Whenever this topic comes up, I always share something that I borrowed from somebody I used to work with, David Cancel, who's now the CEO of Drift. He shared he has a 6-1-20 rule. He said, look, if you ever want to get promoted and you work for him, and I put this onto my teams, is so for 6 months, I need you doing 100% of your day job and 20% of the next job. So 6-1-20. So six months, 100% of your day job. I don't have to tell you what to do. You just do it 20% of the next job. So whether that's I want to be promoted from frontline to management, whether it's I want to shift roles, whatever, I've got to be able to show I can do the day job plus, 20%, not the whole job, but 20% of the next job to show that I'm ready for it. So that's a mindset I always carry when I'm thinking through these.
I love that. Yeah, I think you're right. That growing team member, this is where the people that are a little bit afraid of being seen as a know-it-all kind of step away, because they're like, oh, well, that person's, they're fine. They know how to do the job. But your job as a leader is not to just let them do their job. It's to help them be awesome at their job. And that's what's going to turn you from being kind of a mediocre leader to being the best leader they ever had. And it's about attitude. If you were a micromanager, you might be providing that coaching, but you'd be nitpicking everything they did, and it's a different kind of attitude. If you're an effective manager, when you're coaching a growing team member, you're looking for the ways to help them improve in a way that helps their careers grow, and that attitude makes all the difference. Okay, last one before we get to my resources list. Delegation. I mentioned this earlier. This helps both the manager and their direct reports. This is how I think about delegation, because this is a challenge area for me. I am very bad at delegating. I have to challenge myself all the time to delegate more effectively to my team.
At least you're self-aware to know that.
Yeah, I try to catch myself all the time though. So the way I think about it is you want to delegate things that are going to support that team member's goals. That's number one. You want to make sure you can also delegate things that they can handle. So they have to be far enough along in their progression with the role to be able to handle this thing. So don't give people more than they can handle. It should be an item that you actually benefit from too as a leader. So things you need help with. Don't just make up stuff to delegate. Take things that are real from your job and delegate real things. And kind of a good place to start is think about reporting or meetings they could attend for you, or projects that you're working on that you could use help with. Those are a good place to start as you're thinking about it. And then you need to train the person on why and how to do this job. So they need to, you can't just hand it off and go, here, run with it. You actually have to teach them what is a quality job and what is the timeline you're expecting and how you want them to do it. within reason. I mean, give them the structure and then let them take care of the details. But you need to give them enough to work with structure-wise. Don't just throw it at them.
Sure.
So that's delegation, and this frees you up as a leader to continue to focus on your team and do the things with the new people that are coming on board that you need to do. So with that, I just want to mention a couple of my favorite management resources. If anyone in the audience has ever worked for me in the past, you know the 12 elements of great managing. I used to make every single person who ever wanted to be a leader on my teams read that book. It's fantastic. It gets you in the mindset of a great leader. So that one's about leadership. It's a data-driven book that is based on a study that was done on what it takes to create engaged employees. Another one that I want to mention that I think is a great resource for brand new leaders who've maybe never been a leader before, and I'm digging through my pile so I can grab it. It's called The Effective Manager. It looks like this.
Mm-hmm.
This book goes through all of the tactics that I've talked about today in a lot more detail and provides great suggestions. It also provides the research that is behind why you do 30 minutes once a week for your one-on-one meetings. So if you don't believe me, you can go back and look at this book and look at the research.
Cool, nice. There's actually
yeah.
a question on why to do it 30 minutes once a week. So that's your answer. I think
That's
it was
the
Genevieve who asked
answer.
that question.
There is actually, they did research on that and to figure out what drove the best performance, like what is the right cadence and what is the right timing for those meetings that drives optimal performance, and that's where they landed. My Way or the Highway is for people who want to not be a micromanager or are working for a micromanager and need to know how to deal with that. As I mentioned that one earlier. 3 other books that I think are great for leaders. One is called Multipliers. This is amazing for anyone in the audience who is a VP of customer success or otherwise has managers working for them. It's about how great leaders build other great leaders, and it has some amazing examples in the book. So that one I would really recommend for all of you who are senior leaders. If you are a wannabe leader and you find that you're getting passed up for promotions, there are 2 resources for you. What Got You Here Won't Get You There is a fantastic, again,
required reading on my team.
Yeah. It is a research-based book on the things that people do as individual contributors that make them great and why those don't always translate into being a good manager or a leader. And so if you're getting stuck on a promotion, read this book. It can help you get unstuck. A few years later, they wrote a book. It's a pretty recent one called Why Women Rise. And this is the female version of What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I would recommend reading both. But this is some of the things that are specific to women that can hold us back from promotions. And so I would say definitely read that if you're a woman. Either way, I think it's interesting reading for all women and men, frankly, who want to help women promote in our career, in our field. So read these books. These are great. These should all be on your management bookshelf. I think they're great tools. One other thing I want to mention, and then we'll go to a few questions before the end, is leadership book clubs are a great way to train your managers to be better managers. This is a tool that I've used for years. You can get your leadership team together and have them read a chapter a week. That's all it takes, and to talk about it and talk about how you can apply the things that you're learning in these books to your role as a leader. That is such a cheap way to do leadership training for your leaders on your team and make a big impact on your company. And so I think if you don't have a training budget and you're wondering, how can I make sure my leaders are being developed? That's a great way to do it. It sounds like you've done some of that too, Mark.
Yeah, definitely done some of that. And I love the idea of exactly what you just shared there. I studied something recently, and I'm going to screw up the numbers, but in principle, it was talking about basically how adults learn, the adults learning model. And what it turned out was a small portion of the way an adult learns something is, reading something or sitting in a class being communicated to, that's maybe like 15, 20% of the learning. Then a good chunk of the learning, maybe the next 30%, like I said, don't hold my feet to the fire on the numbers, is just talking it out with colleagues, with peers. That's the next level of me learning. And then the final level of me learning is applying, observing, getting coaching, getting feedback, and continuing to apply. So that's actually how adults learn. So what you're talking about is the first two steps that maybe even get you 75% of the way there.
Yeah.
And then if you can couple that with a really good coaching feedback mechanism at the end, that's how you really can drive true learning.
Yeah, I think that's great. All right, let's hit some questions.
All right.
We probably have time for like
compile
2, maybe
some
3.
of them. We got a couple.
Okay.
We got time for a few. But you're right. We'll either have to have you back or do, a big long kind of follow-up blog post, because we got a bunch in here. A tactical one right at the top. You and I were talking about the importance of video. We had some people that gave us a little bit of pushback saying, look, either I have bandwidth issues, so I can't do video,
Fair.
or I've got some people on my team that see it as a privacy thing. Like, how do I get them to open it up? I have some thoughts there. What are your thoughts?
Well, if you're the leader, you can you have the authority to insist for one. But also I think you can talk to your team about the fact that it's about creating a relationship. I think it's not about seeing what they're doing. It's not about monitoring where they're sitting or whether they're in a professional outfit or any of that. It's really about having a face-to-face relationship with people. And I think explaining why you want to do that is important. I have to tell you, one of my favorite things about this time right now is the fact that I get to see everybody's houses, pets, kids, dogs, all of that stuff. And
whatever Zoom background they can come up with.
Whatever's in their background, or whatever creative Zoom background they've got. Bandwidth issues aside, I mean, I think that's a companies are going to need to start thinking about setting employees up for working from home better in terms of bandwidth and stuff. I think that's kind of more of an infrastructure thing, but and it's real. I had to have somebody drop off a call this morning because the bandwidth just wasn't there because their kids were also Zoom meeting for school.
Yep.
So it doesn't always work, but if it can work, you should ask that they do it, and it's requesting that. I don't know, Mark, if you have more ideas on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing I was going to say on the bandwidth thing is, like, if somebody on my team comes to me and says, look, Mark, I've got bandwidth issues, like, I'll figure out how to, get them an extra $50 a month to add more bandwidth to their Comcast bill. I don't know. Be creative about it. Let's, but those are solvable ones. Let me think. Let's do time for one more. I've got a bunch sitting in front of me. I've got questions like, what are the best days and times for one-on-ones? Why weekly?
Oh, okay. I will answer that first one.
Okay.
Best days and times. The days and times that you will not have to reschedule it. Whatever that is for you. Just pick a day and time that works for you and the other person that is least likely to get rescheduled. And that's going to vary from person to person.
Agreed. And the only thing I would even add to that is sometimes you kind of know, I'm a morning person, I'm an afternoon person, I get a lull during a certain time of day. So what I do is I schedule mine based on both mine and my team members, in addition to when they're not going to get rescheduled, but just, a time where we're both going to be on, right?
Yeah.
Because that's, for me, the most important time of the week is when, I'm working and coaching with my team. Let's pause it there. I wish we had more time. We're going to have you back. And I'm going to keep track of, I've got all the questions here. I've got them all listed.
Thank you.
So we'll follow up. Kevin's got a great question. Genevieve's got great questions. We've got, some people are asking, how do I work with a manager who I know more about customer success than they do? Maybe it's a sales leader who just took over customer success because we just reshuffled. We got questions like that. A lot of these could be, sessions in and of themselves.
Yeah. Well, so all of you have my email address sitting in front of you right now. So if you have a burning question and you can't wait for Mark to get me the list, you can email me, and that's fine. And I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with your group, Mark.
It's been great. We've loved it. I've had a great time, and obviously everyone's gotten a ton out of it because of how much interaction we've had. One ask I'm going to make of the group before we wrap up is in the follow-up, in addition to trying to answer some more of the questions, I'm going to send through a survey. I want to get your feedback and kind of ideas and advice for what does this series look like moving forward. I mean, this has been really fun for me. It sounds like it's been fun for everybody else who's listening in on. I want to make sure that we're continuing to level up, add value. If there's topics that you'd like us to spend more time on, if there's specific guests you'd like us to spend more time on, if there's a different format you'd like, love to get that feedback. Either give it to me in the survey or email me directly. I'm mark.stoddard, STODDARD, at clientsuccess.com. You all get emails from me, so you should have that by now. But again, thanks, Kristen. I think this was fantastic. I love the topic. Like I said, we're going to have to get you back and do a follow-up to it. And,
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, let's definitely do it. But yeah, any last words you want to share with everybody?
No, just thanks to everyone who came out today. And
Great.
like I said, connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out if you have questions. Thank you.
Awesome.
Stay
All
safe,
right, thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.
All right. Yep, exactly. Stay safe.